Look.
Hello. Thank you very much for having us.
Okay.
Commissioner, we are talking about TTIP. It's a great project. What effects do you hope to get from TTIP?
You start?
Yes.
Okay. Then
If you would look at me, what effects do you expect from TTIP?
TTIP is by far the biggest trade negotiation, bilateral trade negotiation that the European Union ever has been doing. And if we get to a result, this could have a dramatic effect, I believe, for the European economy, directly and indirectly. Directly because it will create a lot of new economic activity, hundreds of thousands of jobs, additional income for our citizens. But I believe that indirectly it will also strengthen our economy on a global scale. If you join up the two biggest economies in the world, which are the United States and ourselves, by the way, we are the biggest European Union. That represents about 50% of the world economy. Now, you can expect that the next big battle on trade is about norms, standards, subsidies, all kind of regulations. And if we make a block, then we could have a major, and we will have a major impact on the further development of trade.
Who tells you that the TTIP will create, as you said, hundreds of thousands of jobs? Where do you know that from?
Well, we are not simply inventing that, So we have asked an independent study, and that's the result they are arriving at. The study also says that it would mean 545 euros for a household. Now, I don't think you can figure this out up to 5 or 10 euros close, but it's obvious that it would have a beneficial effect also on the income of citizens and also on economic growth. And it will, yes. I'm pretty sure that it will create hundreds of thousands of jobs. You should not forget that already now. About 16 million Europeans are working in European companies owned by Americans, and vice versa. It's about the same. About 16 million Americans are working in companies that are in fact European owned. So we already have an economy that is very much intertwined, and if we now can make this breakthrough, it will have a dramatic effect. But I'm using the ifs because it will not be easy to make an agreement. The agreement we have on our mind would have, I'm pretty sure, would have those effects. But is it feasible to have such an agreement? That will have to be demonstrated, and for that you will need a lot of political impetus and steer on both sides of the Atlantic. In Europe, but also in the United States.
Sorry to interrupt you. Let's maybe stick to the effects. You were referring to the study of the Commission. I take it's the CPR.
No, it's a study.
It's a CPR, the CPR study.
It's a study that has been ordered by the Commission. We have not been doing it ourselves.
Okay. But what does the study say? The study says it'll be, after the TTIP is done, it will be a 0.5% growth in GDP, in European GDP, in 10 years, which means it's 0.05 points every year. That's not a big effect, as you called it.
Let me just interrupt. Is that the study that we have ordered?
Yes, can I see it?
Yes.
But you see that 0.5 of 13.2 billion, it's about 60, no? And not 120.
It's 0.59, 0.49, right?
First of all, you should not reason in percentages,
You are doing it, I'm sorry.
I'm saying that we will make away with the large majority of non-tariff barriers in a vast amount of sectors. That's what I'm saying. The indirect effect is also about our position on the world market, our competitive position on the world market. And there the effect, I believe, cannot be calculated in billions of euros. You know, it's not so easy to calculate that. But that will also be dramatic. And it is by far the biggest trade deal one could do, you know.
But I'm always hearing from the Commission it will create jobs.
It will create...
And will have a growth of GDP.
It will create hundreds of thousands of jobs.
Which study says that it will create hundreds of thousands of jobs?
How can you have an increase of the GDP of Europe of 120 billion not creating new jobs? How could you do that? Can you give me a sensible explanation why, if you have that kind of increase of your GDP, that you would not be creating jobs?
Commissioner, you know the scenario where the whole thing is calculated on, which means we have no tariffs and we do away with 80% of the non-tariff barriers. This would basically mean the US are going to join the European Union. You can't do away with 80% of the regulations. That's the scenario the whole thing is based on.
No. I mean, now you are mixing up very different things, you know? No. I'm saying that you are mixing up very different things, and let me try to explain you why.
Please.
No? First of all, tariffs will disappear. The idea is that tariffs disappear.
That's not a problem, is it?
Now, it is a big problem. I could imagine that for a couple of very sensitive agricultural products that would not be the case, that you would have at least very long transition periods, or what they call TRQ, so tariff-rated quotas. But generally speaking, the tariffs will disappear. And that's probably the easiest part. No? Then the regulations. You cannot say 80% of the regulations will disappear.
That's the scenario the whole thing is calculated on.
No, that's not what the scenario says.
The scenario says do away with all the tariffs and do away with 50% of the non-tariff barriers, plus do away with 20% the communicated related non-tariff barriers. Which means you don't have any regulation anymore.
Who is giving the answer, you or me?
I'm just asking you.
You
said it will have a magnificent
You are asking the questions, but what you put it in a special way. You say it will mean making away with 80% of regulations. No, it will mean making away with 80% of the non-tariff barriers. It's not the same. Non-tariff barrier is not synonymous with making away with regulations. No, that's not what it is, and that you are mixing this up. It's not the same.
But you couldn't go on like that without doing away with the regulations, could you?
Why?
What is in your opinion non-tariff barriers if not regulation and standards?
Oh, it's incompatibility of standards. It's about the hidden protectionism that you have in a lot of markets. We are simply not going to do away with regulations, and by the way, we wouldn't have a stance to do that. I see the reasoning coming up, you know, that we would change, for example, a lot of health and safety regulations and all that kind of things. That we would make away with the regulation on hormone leave. That's not at all. That's a simple lie. You know, we are simply not going to do it.
Okay. Then tell me, if you're not going to do that, how are you going to gain the effects all the studies say?
I believe that this study, you know, is very conservative. Very conservative. If really we were able to make away with all tariffs, which I think will not happen because there will certainly stay some in very sensitive areas, but limited. And if we really were to be able to make away with 80% of NTBs, then I'm sure the effect would be much more dramatic than what is foreseen in the study. So this is a conservative study.
What would you do away with? You say 80% of the NTB. What would you want to do away with, if not regulation and standards? You say incompatibility, which means either the US has to agree to lower the standards or to higher the standards, or the European Union.
No, you're mixing up everything. Take, for example, cars. You have a lot of differences between European and American cars, where it is really difficult, if not completely impossible, to demonstrate that this has something to see with safety. it's kind of hidden protectionism. You know, before we made the European internal market of the European Union, we had exactly the same in Europe, you know. For example, the first step for the tractor in almost every country was different. It was 27 centimeter, or 28, or 25, or 32, you know. And we were harmonizing that in Europe as a lot of other things. And for example, in automobiles, I believe we will be able to make away with the largest part of all that kind of regulations, which are in fact NTPs. You know, they don't change anything to safety. But the examples one tries to give on health and safety, on hormones, on cloning, and on GMOs and so on, they are simply not accurate because we are not going to change our European legislation on that. We are simply not going to do it.
But it's not all about cars, is it? I mean, you would have to do away with NTBs in financial sectors. You would have to do away with NTBs on agricultural sector. You would have to do away with the NTBs on the social and on the worker sector.
No, you are saying that. I'm not saying that. You are saying that.
No, I'm just citing the study. If you want to have this effect, Commissioner, you would have to do away with 80% of the NTBs. Where would you take it from? Just from the car market now?
You are simply not accurate in the questions you are putting. Because I have never been saying that, for example, I would make away with regulations with respect to hormones, GMOs and all that. I have never been saying that. You know?
No, on the contrary.
And again, you're mentioning agriculture. Again, you are mentioning it, you know.
You have two possibilities, right? You keep your standards and your regulation, but then you don't need a TTIP. You can just do away with the tariffs and that's it. You can, or
That's simply not. I mean, Europe.
That's a
No.
That's a simple figure of reasoning.
It is no. Excuse me, sir, but it is not. You would never manage to make away with all the tariffs if this is not part of a bigger agreement. You would never manage to do so. There would be massive opposition.
Yeah.
So this is part of a deal that will have to do with tariffs, with investment, with public procurement, with services, and then apart from that you have still the rules and so on. No, it's a vast agreement.
The only thing I'm saying, and I think you understand me correctly, is the figures you're citing
are conservative.
The figures you're citing, you are saying are conservatives.
Yep.
I tell you they're completely unrealistic. Nobody, even in the business, believes that you're going to reach an abolishment of 80% of NTBs.
But what you believe, sir, that's not really what I'm going to discuss. I mean, you can have your beliefs and you can put whatever question. What I'm saying as a political responsible in this is that I am of the opinion that if we really are able to make an agreement that is making away with a lot of NTBs in a number of sectors and making away with tariffs, except maybe for a couple of sensitive products, that this will have a dramatic effect on our economies and that this study on those figures is very conservative. That's what I'm saying as a politician. No? What you think about it, that's your problem, but that's what I'm saying it. If we don't have strategic breakthroughs, you know, in Europe, we are not going to create growth. Forget about it. Before 2008, we had a growth for the last decade before 2008 of about 2%. That's it. Economic growth on a yearly basis, 2%.
TTIP will be
No, I'm not.
0.5% in 10 years.
Let me try to explain you what I want
I
to.
just want to take it into perspective. You're saying we just had a little growth of 2%. TTIP is going into.
Let me explain what I tried to explain. What you think about it, that's to your listeners and that's to you. But let me explain what I'm trying to explain. So before 2008, we had a growth more or less 2%. Why? Because we got a lot of bubbles. In the financial market, in the real estate market, in the banking sector, and so on. What have we been doing since 2008? Making away with those bubbles. No? That's what we have been doing. So we are not going to automatically have a growth of 2% in the coming years unless we have breakthroughs scientifically, product-wise, in conquering new markets. If we are not going to do that, we won't have a lot of growth, you know. Forget about it. So what this really is, it's a strategy for growth, and their trade is a very important factor. And to do that, we need agreements not only with the United States, by the way, also negotiating with a lot of other countries. That's what it is about. Don't think that we automatically are going back to a sustained growth of 1.5 or 2%. Forget about it.
So what you're saying basically is without TTIP we are stuck.
No, I have not been saying that. What I'm saying is that TTIP will help us not to get stuck.
And you're convinced of that?
Yes.
Very good.
And on top of that, I think I'm right.
You're showing that, of course. I mean, you're trade commissioner. You should be right. You better should be right.
No.
You sit in the negotiations. You represent Europe. You represent 28 member countries.
And I will,
you better be right.
And I will make sure that the benefits come to Europe. And if I'm not convinced that it is beneficial for us, then I will simply not make an agreement, you know.
Okay.
I think we have already 15 minutes, by the way.
Okay. If you allow another 5 minutes?
Yes, if you don't interrupt me all the time, it's okay.
I'm sorry, it's just an interesting debate. Don't you think it's the attitude of the Commission is rather business-based? It's rather taking into account many wishes of big business and industry.
No, I mean we just had the third round of negotiations in the US, and there were meetings with about 50 stakeholders, individual meetings, and then the chief negotiators have been answering for hours questions of a gathering of 345 people, representing all kinds of stakeholders in the process. Whenever European Parliament is asking me to come and go, I make quite a lot of speeches. Not only for business people, but in whatever gatherings about this. I have nothing to hide on this, you know.
No, I'm just wondering, because on the lists of your own Commission homepage, there's a list of stakeholders that submitted an opinion to the Commission. And you have, how many do you have? 48 that have submitted an opinion on a working group on growth and jobs. And there's only one NGO in it. It's all like Foreign Trade Association, Futures and Option Association.
That's because they didn't submit it.
European, American.
They have the right to submit it, but they didn't do no. They have the right to submit it.
Then, of course. Then let's go to the questionnaire. That's what the Commission has been sending out. I mean, what should an NGO answer? All the questions are business orientated. This is describe the barriers of regulatory nature, indicate how much the impact of your business activity. You're interrupting me. Indicate what would be the benefits of its removal. Please indicate to which level of government the regulatory obstacles relate. What should an NGO answer to that?
It's a trade negotiation.
Yes.
It is about trade.
You know, but
and it's about
the interest of trade and not the interest of the European people.
Why not?
Because that's not automatically the same thing, as you might know. You're a politician.
No, trade is of the utmost interest for every single European.
I agree. But the interests of trade are not automatically my interests or the interests of the European public.
No, but it's a trade negotiation, and we make sure that the interests of the European citizens are duly taken into account.
But and why are no question in there about conservation of environment?
You cannot build an economy without trade. Try to give me one example in human history where you build a society without trade.
So why do you exclude the social society? Why do you exclude NGOs? Why do you exclude them?
I don't explain.
You have a questionnaire. There's nothing in there saying, protection of European citizens. There's nothing in protection of environment. It's always about business, business, business.
But this is simply not true, sir, because in the European Commission we are following.
You know your questionnaire.
We are following this up. Not only myself, but a vast number of commissioners. And be sure that my colleague for environment or for climate change are looking very closely at this, making remarks, making observations. We are taking this duly into account.
But he's not sitting on the table. You are negotiating that.
Yes, because I'm the Commissioner for Trade,
Why is not the Commissioner for Protection sitting there, the Commissioner of Agriculture?
When there is an international conference on climate change, I'm not sitting there either, which doesn't mean that I'm not following it. It's exactly the same. It's the European Commission, the European Union is represented by the Commission, and I represent the Commission, except, by the way, for agriculture, where the Commissioner for Agriculture is joining in. No?
But don't you agree it would be a good idea?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm ready to give all transparency, not only that my colleagues need, but Parliament needs and whoever, but a negotiation needs to be conducted by somebody who is chairing it. It is like that. It has always been like that. It will also stay like that if you want to get to a result. You know.
Last question, because you're talking about transparency. Do you really think it's a transparent process?
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
you sitting there, how many people are in the room? 50 people? And you representing the 28 member states. There's no other commissioner apart from agriculture, if you take it from apart. And you negotiating the whole thing, and then it goes back to the European Parliament.
No, not at all. We, for example, now had the third round of negotiations, and we got 80 officials who were going for that negotiation to Washington, and they report back. I get very detailed reports of where we are, and it's up to me to take the political decisions on the basis of that. And by the way, beginning of next month, I think we will have 1 or 2 days conference, Mike Froman and myself, to see where we politically stand. You know, I cannot do all these negotiations personally. I mean, that's impossible. By the way, I'm not a technician on all of these issues, but we were 80 people, 80 officials of the European Commission to go to Washington for that negotiation a couple of weeks ago.
You would say that's enough of transparency?
That's not about transparency, that's about negotiating. And then I have to be transparent, and I do so vis-à-vis the European Parliament, and also in Q&A sessions. You know, I'm opening, I'm answering very openly on what we are doing, what we try to get. I have nothing to hide on this. You know, people all the time think, what would they have to hide?
So why are you always meeting with business representatives then? I mean, you have a list, very, very transparent on your homepage, saying, you know, we have been meeting this and that. So, but there's no NGO in it. So don't you think you should take the public along?
I have already been seeing NGOs. You know, I have already been doing so.
You know which percentage?
And we have a stakeholder conference the 14th of January again, where there will be hundreds of people.
There's 98% business and 2% NGOs.
No, it's
so
not
don't
true.
you think it's a bit unbalanced?
No, it's not unbalanced. I mean, I'm very this of all the trade negotiations that the European Union has ever conducted, TTIP is by far the most transparent. You know?
Which doesn't mean it's brilliant as far as transparency is concerned.
I think we are really transparent with respect to this. And it's also necessary to do it, so we will continue to do so, and we are very open with the European Parliament. And I have to say, I'm not criticized on this by the European Parliament, because they know that whenever they put me a question, I really try to give the answer that is, to my mind, the most accurate one.
Okay.
I have nothing much to hide on this. I mean, maybe we should stop here, no? Okay?
If you agree, thank you very much.